Greetings Exiles, BullShifter here with another PS4 Path of Exile video. Today, we're going to be covering Ascendancy, as well as the Labyrinth, the rewards it gives you, and actually picking your Ascendancy. So you'll start off here, and you'll probably notice that we're in Act 3. Now the reason why we're in Act 3 is this is actually where you're going to enter the Labyrinth. Now, initially, you're going to kind of notice this raised stone above where this doorway is. That's typically what you're going to see here. In order to actually open up this doorway, you'll need to do the 6 different Ascendancy trials that are in the part 1 area of the game. Now, the nice thing is, if you click on that stone, even if you don't have all of them, you can actually scroll through all 6 of those stones. It's going to tell you what act that it's in and what area it's in. So you can kind of plan accordingly, go to your world map, or you can also go down to the little waypoint marker and just literally fast travel to where you need to go, do your Ascendancy trial, and eventually once you have all 6, you can come back here to Act 3 and go to the Labyrinth. Now, obviously getting your Ascendancy would be the big reason to do the Labyrinth initially. Your Ascendancy, it's kind of, it's a smaller version of your passive skill tree, which gives you some very powerful nodes that help improve your character. And it gives your character more of a specialization. So when you're looking for the Trials of Ascendancy, they'll always start with one of these plaques. That's how you'll know you're at one. You've probably done a couple of them even if you haven't been looking for them, just from going through the different maps throughout the story. So we'll go ahead, we'll hit the activation device. Now as you can see, there's multiple labyrinths. Each one is going to reward you with 2 Ascendancy points. So you're only going to be able to build your Ascendancy tree 2 points at a time. Now, something to keep in mind while you're doing that is the fact that you can respec points in that Ascendancy tree, much like you can with your passive tree, but it's much more expensive. Instead of 1 point, it's going to cost you 5 to respec in your Ascendancy tree. So even though there's only 8 points, it's still going to be a big deal to respec those points because it's so much more expensive. You know, it's going to be the equivalent to respecing 40 points off of your passive skill tree. So if we go here, it'll actually show us our current location within the Labyrinth. Now, that little dot right there, that's somewhat important because that's going to tell us what type of room that we're in. So that little dot, it tells us there's a forgotten reliquary in here. And what that is it's a green item that'll pop out of a chest that is actually going to debuff one of the boss's buffs when we fight him. So when you fight Azaro, I believe I'm saying that right. If not, I apologize. And I'm going to continue to say his name incorrectly. When you fight him, he's going to have different buffs, and you're going to fight him 3 times. Now, when you gather those green items, you have the opportunity to actually take away one of his buffs to make the fight easier. The obvious reason to do that would be because, well, if you die in the Labyrinth, you have to start all over again. You can't well, you technically can teleport out of the Labyrinth, but if you do, again, you're going to have to start all over. So it's not really worth it to try and use a portal scroll out of here because you're just going to be starting from the beginning all over again. So one of the big things is going to be to simply make sure that you don't die. And there's going to be a lot of things here that are set up to try and make sure that you do die. You're going to see a lot of traps and a lot of puzzles, much like you did in the Trials of Ascendancy. And the reason for that is the trials were exactly as they sound. They were trials for this area to kind of prepare you for the Labyrinth. The Labyrinth is basically one giant trial with some boss fights in between. So we're going to kind of wander here. Now, unfortunately, and kind of fortunately, I kind of like the way that this is set up. You're never actually going to find what I'd consider like a hard walkthrough through the Labyrinth, because every single day the labyrinth changes. So this isn't going to look the same tomorrow as it does today. Everything's going to be different. So, as you see, our next room is going to be that skull. And it's actually going to tell us right on the door what it is. So, this Aspirant's Trial, this is going to be our first boss fight.
The weary traveler.
So he's going to come down after he talks some trash to us. And before each boss fight, you will be able to access your stash. So if you have some spare items, you can throw them in here before the boss fights. I'd recommend doing so because potentially you can run into some pretty good items in the Labyrinth. Not so much this first one, but you will run into some experienced veterans who will actually grind the last Labyrinth over and over and over again. And some people will grind the early ones as well, simply because the keys that you get throughout the Labyrinth will unlock reward chests at the end. And those reward chests can have some great items in them. Currency, some items you can actually equip and use. There can be upgraded skill gems. Just a lot of really good stuff in general. So here's Azaro. And we're going to flat out kick his butt. Like, he doesn't stand a chance. We are way over leveled for this. He can't touch this. He can summon anything he wants to and throw whatever he's got at us. It's not going to matter. So you probably noticed there, he kind of bailed out early. Now the reason for that is in this first fight, once you get his health down to, it's probably about a third of his health, he's going to bail. The second time you're going to get him down about 2/3, and then the third time, you'll actually defeat him. So here's another area where we can potentially get that chest to get that green item that will debuff him. Now, I'm not going to debuff him because one, I'm over leveled for this as is, and two, if you don't debuff him, you're going to get more keys when you finally defeat him, and that gives you a higher potential for some really good rewards. So that's why we're just going to go ahead and just face it head on, fight him at the hardest difficulty we possibly can. And I'm really not too worried that we won't be able to defeat him. We'll have an easy time with it. Probably the most time-consuming thing for us is going to be actually navigating here, especially if we keep lagging around this corner. Okay. I don't know if we're getting pulled back from them. Now, right there was a yellow enemy. I just want to kind of reiterate something from the last video I made, which was my ultimate beginner's guide. I had mentioned skipping the smaller white mobs and just kind of focusing on the blue and yellow mobs, which is a good idea as long as you're not having like a hard time clearing them. But if your clear time is taking you a while, if you're having to sit there and swing and swing and swing at a yellow enemy and it's just taking you a while to defeat him, just skip past him. It's all about clear time. So, and someone had brought that up in the comments, and it was a really good point. Because if it is taking you a while to defeat an enemy, then it's just not efficient XP, and that's really what you're trying to do, is just be efficient. I'm just going to let that guy run away. I'm not going to chase. We're just going to try and push through. And so our next location, there's just a regular room, nothing special here. Yeah, and sometimes you're going to have to fight smaller mobs just to kind of get them out of your way, but I mean, as long as you're not spending a lot of time doing it, it's really not a big deal. So you'll probably recognize a lot of these traps from the Trials of Ascendancy, like I've mentioned before. We're honestly high enough level right now to the point where these traps aren't going to do a whole lot to me, but I'm still going to try to, not run directly into them, just so you can kind of see more or less how you'd want to run this. Just because it's good practice, and not all the labyrinths are going to be this easy, and I'm not going to be this over leveled for all the labyrinths either. Nice diamond flask there. We're probably going to skip past most of these items just because the items that are dropping are going to be level specific to this area. That's just how looting in the game works in general. So I believe this is level 33, the first Labyrinth. And someone can correct me in the comment section if it's, well, I'm almost positive it's level 33. So as level 57, oh, it says in the upper right hand corner, yeah, so it is level 33. As a level 57, I'm not going to find much useful gear in here, so I'm going to skip past most of the items. I'll still pick up currency and certain flasks and things of that nature and skill gems, but I'm not going to pick up weaponry and armor from here because it's just not likely going to do me a whole heck of a lot of good. So we'll go over to our stash, store that gem, store our diamond flask, and we will go fight him again.
Slowness lends strength to one's enemies.
We're going to set some of this up right away, so he's just going to come in and he's going to be getting hit with fireballs as soon as he comes in. Boom. That looks like it hurt. I'll run away, you know you want to. And so we'll actually pick up this item just because it's, tricolor. And they're all attached. So, I mean, that's essentially a chromatic orb right there. So we'll pick up stuff like that. It's the vendor fodder. And like if we find a 6-socket item, we'll be super lucky to find that, and we'll definitely grab that as well. But like those items over there, we're not even going to bother. We can actually, just so I can kind of show you, hit left stick over it. It's actually an item level 35, so it's a little higher, but I mean, it's the same general level of, what this area is. So we're going to skip that stuff. We actually didn't check what type of room this was. I should have done that. Because some of these rooms will have what's called a silver key. And if it has a silver key, there'll be a silver chest to unlock the silver key, which can sometimes give you some pretty decent rewards also. But for this first labyrinth, we're just gonna kind of focus on running through, trying to finish the labyrinth, get our ascendancy points, and we'll kind of talk about just how you want to figure out your ascendancies. Ascendancies aren't daunting at all, in my opinion, just because of the fact that it's so much smaller than the actual passive tree is. You see, I almost ran onto the hot floor there. This is one area that, even being over-leveled, I'm not messing with that floor. That floor is dangerous. It's hot. Got some poison arrows coming in at us. And one thing you'll notice will be kind of a pain about areas like this is if you get hit with those poison arrows, it's going to start to slow you. And you're going to be trying to run across this, see, like right there. And you're trying to run across this floor as quickly as you can before it reignites. So just kind of be careful in areas like that, because that can really put a hurting on you. And we just keep moving on through here. Get rid of a few of these guys just so they're out of our way. Whew, that was close. See, we did take a decent little chunk of damage right there, so... Oh, that's actually the arrows hitting us. That's doing all that damage, too. So you definitely want to be careful. So like I said earlier in the video, if you die here, you have to start all over. It does not matter how far you get in the labyrinth. One death, and you are right back at the beginning. So we can afford to be somewhat aggressive here, just because our level is so high, but we don't want to get overly confident and kind of screw this whole thing up. And that'd be a little embarrassing for the video. We got our next door. I can kind of see what kind of a room we were in. Just a plain room. So the next room, it looks like it's a silver door. So usually there'd be a silver key near a silver door, and it could very well be in this same room. But typically those rooms would be attached. So like I would still consider it worthwhile to kill that gold enemy right there, just because of the fact that, you know, I spammed my volatile dead 2-3 times and he was gone. And that's kind of what's nice about having a solid AoE attack, is you're going to get rid of those enemies with a lot of ease. Now, some of these mobs I wouldn't necessarily normally attack, but I kind of just want them out of the way. Although we can just kind of warp behind them. And I honestly find these labyrinths to just be kind of fun in general. I mean, some people will grind these over and over again, but when it's something that changes every single day, it kind of takes the, you know, the tedious nature out of the grind, which is one thing I feel this game does really well, especially once you get towards the end game, because you're going to be running maps, which is another thing I wanted to bring up. So in my last video, I didn't realize that they had actually changed the way that Endgame works. It used to be to where you beat the game once, you would suffer your penalty to your resistances, you'd play through on the next highest difficulty, and you'd get another penalty to your resistances, and then on the next difficulty you could play maps. They've completely restructured that, so, and thank you for bringing this up in the comments also. So now you'll play through to Act 5, and you'll actually suffer your resistance penalty in Act 5, and then you'll play to 10, and when you finish Act 10, you'll get your second resistance penalty, and then you're going to start mapping. I'm not going to get too much into detail about mapping, because that's essentially our big endgame activity, and you know, many people will tell you that the first 10 acts are pretty much just a very, very long tutorial to get you to the point where you're mapping. A very fun tutorial, but it's still a very small tip of the iceberg compared to the things that you can do after you've beaten the game. So another silver door here. Hate those arrows. But I believe our next area will be our last boss fight here. As long as we don't get ourselves killed. I'm gonna get rid of these guys just because we are taking some damage from these arrows. Well, probably didn't need to pop that flask, but that's okay. And usually when you're trying to get through the map going in a clockwise or counterclockwise formation, it's typically a good way to find your way through. It's because your doorways are usually going to be on the edges. They're not really going to be in the middle of the map. I would definitely encourage exploration through here, just because of the fact that, you know, you could potentially find some pretty good items, especially if you actually are around level 33 once you start this. So if you're around level 33, 35, you can definitely find some improved items compared to what you may have currently equipped. And as I mentioned before, there's always the chance that you'll run into some chests that have, you know, some upgraded skill gems also. It's not just necessarily gear that you're going to find throughout here. So this is going to be our last boss fight. Now, I kind of think he's an easy boss to fight, just because, as you've probably noticed as we've gone through, and it's a little difficult to kind of see just because of the fact that we're a little over-leveled for this, but he really telegraphs his attacks. He doesn't attack all that quickly. There's not really like a big one-hit KO that you have to look out for. So as long as you just kind of play it smart and just, you know, don't stand there and eat up hits, you're gonna be fine fighting this guy. I mean, we're gonna eat him up right here. We're gonna eat him for dinner. That was a nice little attack on his part. Although I think that was, yeah, that's the little ghost that's on his shoulders there. So we got a treasure key. And we'll take this 5-socket item. So, I mean, that's essentially it. We just ran through. We did do kind of a quick run through just because I didn't want to, you know, turn this into a 40-minute video. But the first thing you want to do, just so you don't forget, is go to the Altar of Ascendancy. So these, I'm playing as the Templar. These are Ascendancy options. You can hit X, and just, you know, like your passive tree, you can hover over and, you know, just kind of figure out what direction you'd like to go. And you can exit out, check out all three, see which one you want to go with. I'm doing more of a build that relies on critical hits, which the Inquisitor is a bit better for. It also has some elemental damage. So there's some really nice, actually, oh that's right, there's the critical strikes. And this actually stacks really well with something that's on my passive tree. And that's something you want to keep in mind too. When you're building your own passive trees, if you're not necessarily familiar with the Ascendancies, I would look up the Ascendancies first, just to make sure you're not overstacking something that you don't need to overstack. I have a skill gem equipped on my Templar, which gives me 100% reduced critical strike chance. But essentially what my goal is with my passive tree is to make up for that 100% to bring me, you know, close to 0 again. And then within my Inquisitor tree, I can go ahead and take Righteous Providence and get 100% increased critical strike chance against enemies that aren't affected by elemental ailments. And none of my enemies will be, because of the fact that, let's see, there was a skill tree, maybe that's actually my passive tree. But anyways, I have a skill equipped to where I'm not doing any sort of elemental ailments to enemies at all. So those are just things to kind of pay attention to and stack, because that's really what's going to make your character a solid character, is knowing what to stack in those situations. So for now, we're actually going to go ahead and increase our elemental damage. And we're going to go with Sanctuary as well. Just because we can regenerate mana a little quicker and just kind of spam our attacks from there. Well, we could go with Righteous Providence right away as well. Oh, it's enemies that... So this actually will give you benefits to both, which is kind of nice as well. Increased elemental damage and cast speed. And this is also nice as well with the Instruments of Virtue. This is really nice also because the increased spell damage if you cast a spell recently. I have to cast Desecrate in order to begin casting my Volatile Dead. So that's always going to give me that 30% increase to spell damage. So I mean, quite honestly, all of these are really good skills to have. So some of these can actually be pretty difficult to choose between. And this is nice. See, Sanctuary and Pious Path, I believe is how you say it. They work really nice together because you have that concentrated or consecrated ground, and those will stack on top of each other as well. So that's a pretty good path to go. And this is nice as well too, because you're getting a plus 6% to all your elemental resistances and adding that elemental damage. But I do think we'll go with the original idea of starting with Sanctuary, so we can get that consecrated ground and have that 10% increased damage, and then also have that mana regeneration, so we can essentially spam attacks and not have to think twice about it. Just because of the fact I do have a solid movement skill because I have gems stacked on top of it, but at the same time, it's not something I necessarily rely on during fights. It's much more important for me to be able to continuously cast, which is why I want that extra mana. So we can go ahead and exit out of that. That's the big thing you want to remember before you hit this return to town portal. The other thing, we picked up a key, so we get to open a treasure chest. Now, this is what a lot of people grind for, are these keys to open these treasure chests, because they can contain some really great items. So, got a good feeling about this one. Not so much, but that's okay. And yeah, I believe we only picked up one key in this run, so we'll only be able to open the one chest. There is a possibility that you can drop more keys out of each chest, so you may get lucky in that regard as well. Now, this is the very last thing that you can do after finishing. You can do this anytime after you finish the Labyrinth. This is essentially a divine crafting table. So in the very first one, we'll be able to take a pair of gloves and put a random enchantment on them. So we don't have an implicit modifier on this one, so it makes sense to go ahead and apply that enchantment because essentially it's going to replace any implicit that you have on there. I'm pretty sure that's what it replaces. So we'll go ahead and enchant. And it's going to trigger Word of Fury on hit, which, not a bad enchantment. So the first one's going to unlock gloves. The second one that you complete, not this labyrinth, but the next higher labyrinth in difficulty, that will unlock boots. And the third will unlock helmet enchantments. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. So that essentially covers the labyrinth. That's what you're going to be doing, running through the labyrinth. Just keep in mind to gather those keys if you can. I would recommend that you explore a bit more than I did. I kind of rushed on through just because I wanted to give the main idea of what the labyrinth is. And just reiterate the points, you know, don't die, play cautiously, be on the lookout for good items, because some great items can show up in the labyrinth. And definitely go out and, you know, get that Ascendancy, because it's going to make your character that much stronger. So I do have some more videos that are going to be coming. I want to cover the Menagerie. I want to cover Delves. I've been experimenting a bit with Delves. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite parts of this game. I'm going to try and get more of these tutorial videos out as soon as I can, just because I would like to start streaming the game. I have a couple of different things I'd like to do in streams, and I'd like to hear your feedback on what you think. I'm going to start a fresh character that I'm essentially going to go through and build this character and show you exactly how I'm building this character as we go, so you can kind of get the idea of how to build your character's passive tree, you know, what items to equip, how to move through efficiently, just kind of get a firm grasp on all of these different tutorial videos all in one. We're going to kind of piece it all together. So I'd like to do that, and then after we've kind of built that character up, and I'm going to play it exclusively on streams, we're going to get to a point to where I'd kind of like to start a third character, and when we get to that point, I want to have the channel built up enough to the point where there's enough people watching the stream to where I'm going to have you guys create that build. So as we level up, I want you guys to kind of pick those passives from the passive tree, and we'll kind of see exactly what you guys have learned, and we'll see how your build does in the game. So that's going to conclude this video. Thanks again for watching. The channel is growing rapidly, which I'm very excited about, because it's going to make these streams that much better to hopefully, you know, have more people participating in them live. Again, any suggestions for anything else that you'd like to see tutorial videos on? As I mentioned, we're going to do one on the Menagerie. We're going to do one on Delves. I'm going to briefly kind of show you how I've built this Templar that I'm using. And there's a few other things I'd like to cover as well. I just need to kind of figure out exactly what order I'd like to put those in. So thanks again for watching. Hope you learned a lot from this video. Feel free to ask any questions in the comment section and give any suggestions. And as always, may the RNG be with you.